Good afternoon, everyone. If you've already turned in, go ahead and let us know you're here in the chat function. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat bubble icon, and you can just click the button and share with us your concerns, your questions. We want to make sure that we get to those today. We'll begin in just a little bit. Everyone looks great. We're getting ready to go. Again, if you are just tuning in and you have questions, we absolutely would love to make sure that we answer those today. So please do make sure you click that chat icon at the bottom of your screen. It should be there, and you can make sure your questions are entered there so we can make sure that we answer them for you. Thanks for coming today. We'll just give it a couple more minutes and see if more of our friends join us. Hang tight, panelists, hang tight. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the virtual workshop through our Tools for Life Learning Center at Loudoun Habitat for Humanity. You are here for home buying do's and don'ts from your neighborhood realtor. We thank you so much for being here today. My name is Carrie Murphy. I serve as a Director of Resource Development for Loudoun Habitat for Humanity very proudly. And we're so excited that you're joining us today. I think you're in for a treat. We've got 3 experts that are going to help us through this process of how to buy your first home, what to consider, or even if you're in the market again, what you can prepare this next time around. So I just want to lead you through what you can expect from today. We're going to be talking about, again, how do you prepare? What are the most important things that you as a home buyer need to prepare? And how do you work with your realtor and vice versa to develop clear expectations? There's lots of realtors and wonderful professionals out there to choose from in our community, but how do you find a realtor that you can trust? And what can you do to make sure that relationship is successful, right, panelists? So I am so excited to introduce our guests that are here today. First, we have Mr. Barry Taylor. Barry is with an associate broker with Weikart in Loudoun, and he is the current president of the Dulles Area Association of Realtors, better known as DAR. And we thank you for your commitment, Barry, to your organization and the community, and welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Good
and we have Mr. Dave King. Dave is the managing broker with Long & Foster and has many years of experience that he will be able to share with us today. And again, Dave, we're so excited that you could share your expertise with us. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least is our Loudoun Habitat for Humanity board president, Allison Metzger, who is the owner and associate broker of Green Lawn Realty. So again, Allison, always great to have you here. We are so appreciative of all your support of our organization. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay. let me just check my notes here. We have a lot to cover today, but again, if you didn't hear my announcement before, please do make sure that you are sharing your questions. I'm sure our panelists can talk on and on about all of their expertise and their stories, and again, focus on the discussion points we covered earlier. But if you have questions, that's what's important as well. We want to make sure that we get to them. So make sure that you are putting them in there. But maybe one of your first questions is, what must a home buyer do to prepare for the home buying process? I mean, it's kind of a daunting thing to think about. So much change. I think it ranks right up there with one of the most stressful things you can do in your life. So, Barry, I'll let you take this one. What should a home buyer do?
So there's certainly no substitute for being prepared. And I think each of us would start off by saying to any potential client, the first thing that we will want to make sure is that they are properly financially qualified and prepared for this purchase. In the initial instance, we would introduce them to one of our trusted lenders to have that initial sort of financial discussion to determine, firstly, that they are properly qualified, because everyone has different financial circumstances, but make sure they're properly qualified for making a purchase. And equally, we as realtors, we like to know, at what level they're looking to purchase, because that helps us then properly identify where we're going to be helping them to look to find the type of home that they're able to purchase. So yeah, the very first thing I think we would always want to ensure is that people are properly qualified financially, because it saves us both a lot of time and trouble if we know exactly where we stand from the outset, and we can search within the parameters of which they're qualified to do so.
Excellent. So other than being financially prepared, obviously critical, and kind of knowing a price point range, that would be the best focus. So you can tailor your search in helping the realtor. Allison, what would you like to add? Is there anything else that you can think of where you thought, boy, if my future buyer only had ...
Yeah, and it's important to really stop and talk and talk through sort of the obvious things, which may change and may not be that obvious to everyone, is really what size home you're looking for. Is it a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom? Is your family growing? Are you downsizing? Obviously, location. Are you, what do you want to be in more of an urban area? Do you want, a big piece of land where you can spread out? And then what features in the home are really a necessity? Obviously, there's a lot of things that we want to have in a house, but there are items that really are necessary that we really don't want to compromise on. So kind of creating a clear list of the things that you want, the things that you need, and again, the location and the size of the property are things to really sort of narrow down before you get out and start looking at properties, because oftentimes folks look at a house and they fall in love with it, but it's really not what they were looking for initially. So it's really having that conversation with yourself, your family members, and your realtor to talk about what is it you're really, really looking for.
That's a great point, because obviously it has to match your lifestyle, and how are you going to best use this? It's your home, but your shelter, right? How is it going to meet your needs as an individual or a family? So that's great. Dave, anything to add?
No, I think Allison and Barry have, they've covered it. The big thing is the wants and needs list. Like Allison said, there's things we really must need, and it could be related to a school system. It could be related to like a commute that's very important. But the wants and needs list, like some things are mandatory and some things could be, discretionary. And those are the things you may have to give up. There is no perfect. But again, like both colleagues said, once you discuss those with your agent and your lender and even your family and friends, etc., you'll find what floats to the top is the most important. And I would caution people to really stick to their guns and look for that.
Yeah, excellent. And actually, Dave, that is a perfect segue to our next question. So I'm going to let you continue. What advice do you have for home buyers that to set those, realistic expectations? As you just said, there is no perfect fit. I bet you've all had experiences where you've come really, really close to making it 100%. But tell me, Dave, what are some of the pieces of advice that you have for home buyers to set those realistic expectations?
Well, when I think for the three of us, I think when we got our license, at least I'll speak for myself, the internet was around, and of course it was already growing, in leaps and bounds, but like the amount of information you can find today is astounding. So, I'm a big proponent of two things, like looking and doing research online, but that's not a substitute for driving. So when I was out selling on a day-to-day basis, I would always advise people to, once we narrowed down a location, a geographic location, maybe go and drive it. Maybe drive it at different times of the day. Maybe drive out and see that property like on a morning when you would have to commute to maybe where you work, etc.
So critical.
Yeah, I think those are the big things, like those sort of surrounding things that make up our lives. It's like shopping, schools, worship, sports, all those kind of things make a big difference. It's not just price, and the internet, and then, physically going to look at it. If you combine the two of those things, I think you're in great shape.
Excellent. That's great advice. Barry, what do you think?
I think Dave makes a great point, and a lot of homes that you see are very similar in style and design as you drive around. What is different is the neighborhood. So quite often, you need to be able to live in the neighborhood that the home is in. So if the neighborhood doesn't work for you, it doesn't matter how good the house is, because at the end of the day, it's all about living. So I think Dave's point about driving around, having a look at the neighborhood, having a look at the amenities, and really getting a feel for the environment as much as the house itself is key, because you're talking about more than just the home itself. You're also talking about how you're going to live in that neighborhood. So you want to make sure you're comfortable with the neighborhood and the surroundings that you're going to be moving into. So research is paramount, and Dave makes a great point about most buyers out there probably know more about the area than a lot of the realtors, because they've spent a lot of time doing their research online, having a look. So they're pretty well up to date on that. So we have to be on top of our game to ensure that we know a little bit more than them. So we need to do a lot of research ourselves to sort of compare with our sort of clients, to help them in that sort of process of identifying the right sort of location and that for their home.
Excellent. Barry, sometime offline, we'll have to talk about the time where we bought our house that we're in now. And I literally cornered a neighbor who's a great friend of mine,
Yep.
for like half an hour, just peppering her with questions because they
sometimes you're fortunate when you're driving around and showing homes, you see some neighbors, and some of them are only too willing to come across and say hello and tell you all the good things about the neighborhood. So if you're fortunate to be able to do that, there's no better sort of introduction to your new environment than meeting your neighbors firsthand, and they can give you, the good, bad, and different of the neighborhood. That's really good.
And like I said, it wasn't too off-putting because we are great friends now. So that's great.
Yeah.
Allison, I love all these suggestions, and I'm thinking that individuals should even, literally take some time and write out a list, as you said, Dave, how important is it to get to the grocery store quickly? What are the schools like? Where, if that's an issue for you right now, what other recreational activities do you enjoy? Allison, anything else on that checklist that you can think that people should consider?
Yeah, I think it's also really important to, part of this bigger discussion is really understanding the real estate market in your area as a whole, because right now we're in a very competitive market. Houses are going for over asking price, multiple offers, and this is something that you will want to discuss with your realtor. So really understanding the expectation of what's going on in the market. If it's a competitive situation, you're really not going to get a great deal on a home right now. So it's important to, not fall in love with a house and then potentially not get the house, right? Your offer is not accepted. So setting the expectation that the process may not be as simple as you would think it would be. There were times in recent history where you had a variety of houses to go look at. You had time to have these conversations and drive around. Right now, it just doesn't happen to be one of those markets. This is kind of a very fast-paced situation. So the expectation is, don't fall, look at multiple houses and, pick an A, B, and a C house if you're in a situation where you have to move quickly. So that's part of the expectations. It's understanding the process from beginning to end is not always super smooth. Hopefully, your team of experts, your realtor, your home inspector, your title company, your mortgage folks will work in tandem to make it as smooth as possible, but sometimes there are hiccups, and that's not unusual. You're not being singled out. It's just part of the process. That's why they say it is stressful sometimes. Unfortunately, we're in a stressful time for buyers. It's a great time if you wanted to sell your house, but for those sellers, they may not be selling right now because there's nowhere for them to go either. So understanding that all of the characteristics of a house might be perfect, but the market and the situations that we can control may not.
That's great. That's great. And you guys are helping me out so much. You talked about your expert team. I'm going to give this one to Barry as the president of DAR. What are the building blocks to identify and select a realtor?
I mean, this is an easy one. At the end of the day, we all think that we're the best. We're all out there sort of, vying for first place. We want to be the realtor of choice for any client that comes to us. But we know at the end of the day that reality is very different. And real estate is very much a profession of relationships. And everybody is different in the way that they communicate and the way they respond to each other. So the first thing I would strongly suggest is firstly, don't pick the first realtor that you come across. Get recommendations from friends who have purchased recently or sold recently, and take your time to interview the realtor and get to know a little bit more about them, a little bit about obviously their experience and that in the business, but equally about them as a person, because you're going to have a relationship probably for a fair amount of time, and there's going to be a lot of communication going on between the two of you. So you want to make sure that you have a relationship that's actually going to be profitable for both of you, so that you can make progress, continual progress, and that you can, you can have some of those serious discussions. And sometimes we have to have honest and serious discussions with each other about the process for different reasons. So, once you have a better understanding of the personalities involved, it's far easier to have those discussions. And we do the same, between us as realtors as well. We like to get to know the realtor on the opposite side of the transaction, because that relationship for us is equally as important. Because we need to have conversations back and forth, between buyers and selling agents as well. So, the relationship between all parties is very, very important. So do take your time, when you're selecting your realtor, to make sure that you've got someone who you can trust, you can understand, and that one that is going to be there by your side constantly throughout this process.
Excellent. And I think, that goes back to the number one discussion point we talked about today, which is be prepared. So
absolutely,
obviously, if you're thinking about getting into the market and looking for a new home to buy, you want to obviously, as you just pointed out, Barry, allow yourself enough time to really do your research to find that trusted partner to help you. So Dave, can you share any experiences, no names, but if you would have said, if only my client would have done this or shared with me this to help build that trust? That's a loaded question, I know.
Well, No, that's okay. I mean, Barry's dead on. Like, you know, my philosophy with clients is to almost have them treat us like doctors.
Ah,
We can only help you as much as, you know, what you give us will help us help you. So, you know, there's no dumb questions.
mhm.
You know, we love, in fact, to tell you the truth, for me, if I have a client and they ask a lot of questions, actually, I enjoy it. It makes it, and actually I can tell they're more serious. So I prefer questions. There are no dumb questions. And usually like I would say most of the time we both learn something along the way. I think in terms of any big surprises, I'm trying to think, is in our business, I think, you know, Allison and Barry would agree, like our business, like surprises are not normally a good thing in our business. So we try to eliminate those. And so I probably have some that I don't even want to remember.
Yeah, right.
Like
That's
forgotten them.
okay.
But I would say one, like for instance, not long ago, someone in my office, we had somebody that was moving west because, you know, the virus has created this environment where folks are like exploring, you know, more rural areas and, you know, exploring options out our way, out this neck of the woods. And
Right.
somebody that was keen on a house that actually near the very end, luckily, we figured out that the internet connection wasn't strong enough for them to do their work.
Mm,
And that's a surprise that like near, you know, we were able to like navigate that, but that's something that you know, close in, you wouldn't normally think because everyone has Fios or Comcast or whatever. Well, obviously if you want to move out to some of the outlying counties, internet service is a big deal, especially if you're a teleworker in today's world.
right.
Having a strong, reliable connection is very important. So that's a surprise like we don't want to have near the end, you know?
Right. And if you're home with students and
Yeah,
everyone online is,
absolutely.
and that's a very good point. I'm excited. We have some questions that I'd like to just stop for a minute and break to, because as I said, if you're watching, we definitely want to make sure we get to your questions. So here's the first one. And Allison, we'll let you jump in on this one. And actually, Dave, it really was to your point. How do you know the area you're moving to is a good area? What resources can you share to help determine how to research a community that you might, or a geographic area that you might want to be moving to?
That is a really good question. And I will say, I'm not sure my clients do enough due diligence in this area in some cases. And that would include doing some really basic searching. You know, if you want to find out the safety of a neighborhood, you call the police department, the local police department, and you ask them what their crime rates are. Now, you have to decide as a homeowner what you consider safe, because my idea of crime may not be your same idea. So I can't give you any advice in that department, but you can have the conversation with your sheriff's office, look at the statistics, look at the type of crimes, the number of crimes. Really simple process to make you feel comfortable that I think is really, really a minimum somebody should do. The second thing you can do is schools is always a big question that comes up. And again, I can't give you any advice on what I consider a good school, because what I consider a good school may not be what you consider. Depends, right? We all have different backgrounds that come from different.
Back to the expectations piece, right?
Right. And of course, we're all virtually learning now, so I'm not sure if any of it matters, but that's another story. But there are some resources online. I will say I would take anything you find online with a grain of salt. So there's a very popular page called greatschools.com. And they rank schools, and it's based on testing, and it's based on some parent feedback. But again, these are websites that are trying to generate traffic to their sites. I can't really speak to how credible all of them are. There's several sites like that, but it's worth taking a look.
Right. I would imagine too, honestly, correct me if I'm wrong, Barry, Dave, jump in. I would imagine that just pulling up the town information. You know, for
So
example,
the county website is a great
yeah,
resource.
go to the
They,
county website.
yeah, they've got all the resources there and links to so many of the different aspects of interest that people are going to have. You know, whatever they're looking for, there's a link to most things through the county website. So that's a great resource. And is often overlooked because people do their own searches just on the internet. But if you go to loudoun.gov, for example, you know, they've got loads and loads of sort of links to different aspects of living in Loudoun County, you know, from the taxes at the one end, you know, to lifestyle and sort of culture at the other end. So there's some really great sort of resources within the government website if you've got a little bit of time to explore it.
And right, the tourism, perhaps, so you
Yep.
could look at that. I know we were able to drive to where we were looking at, and if you're looking at a part of the country that you're not able to travel to, try to look online for the local papers, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And social media also, you know, social media is good and bad, but it's got a ton of information. If you want to, you know, chat with a local moms group, or you know, if you're in a particular hobby in gardening, or, you know, find out what social media outlets there are in that neighborhood and connect with the people one-on-one.
I'm going to take a stab at this one, but jump in. What are some, because I think we alluded to this in the previous question, but what are some good websites or resources to know what is near the house you are interested in for maybe you don't want to drive to the grocery store? I don't know. I might hit Google Maps and expand. Is that what I should do, Barry?
It's one way of doing it. I mean, with Google Maps, you can input all sorts of data that you want to see that appears in the area that you're interested in. So Google Maps is a great way of just sort of doing a sort of a fairly sort of close-in sort of study of the neighborhood to find out, you know, where different amenities are, you know, where the grocery stores are and things like that. So that's a great way of doing it as well. So there's no hard and fast rule about what works best and what doesn't. Everyone is slightly different, and everyone has different priorities. Some people see, you know, being very close to a grocery store very important. Others are quite happy to drive sort of, you know, 10 or 15 minutes to get there if necessary. So everyone is slightly different. But no, Google Maps is a great resource. And a great way of finding out, you know, at a snapshot, you know, what's fairly close to you in terms of, you know, whatever amenities may be of interest.
Right. And if you're in an urban area and maybe you don't want a lot of noise, are you checking where the fire station is? Are you checking where the hospital is? Are you close to that? And will it actually be too noisy? So,
Yep.
Okay. Dave, how do you know if you overbid on a house, especially in a seller's market? That's a good one.
Well, like Allison said earlier, you know, there's no one size fits all. So from a negotiating standpoint, or I think you almost have to do it case by case. You know, we've had people where maybe on paper, like technically, they could have potentially overpaid, but it was the one-off house they really wanted. So, and I think Barry mentioned it earlier, it's worth what you're willing to pay for it. Now, of course, we always recommend getting appraisal. So you have a neutral third-party person that's going to be on the back end to like make sure that what the numbers are equal what, you know, they should be.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm sure our other colleagues have had the same case. We've had people where an appraisal came in low, and the buyer wanted that property so much, the property just spoke to them, that they went ahead and just made up the difference. So, like anything, I think I mean, is a Ferrari worth what it's worth? I mean, you know, some people, a Prius is totally fine, and some people are looking for a Ferrari. Are they overpriced or underpriced? It's what you're willing to pay and what it's worth to you. And then, you know, obviously if you have the means and it fits your budget, etc., it's very hard to determine that, especially in today's market. And one thing, let me just add this too, because we had this pop up in our office yesterday. Something for this period where we are now, and Allison touched on it, the seller's market we find ourselves in now here in really our whole region, but let's just say Loudoun County, because I think we're all sitting in Loudoun County today,
Right.
is creating sort of a backlog on appraisals. Like they haven't caught up to contracts yet. So in some cases, it can appear that you overpaid because an appraisal could come back what we consider light. But remember, in some cases, the properties haven't even been recorded at the courthouse yet that would bump up the comps to equal the sales price. That's where we're back where we started with a trusted, knowledgeable real estate agent that can help you.
Right.
Those are the kind of things we have to navigate that pop up. There's no textbook. It's sort of, shoe leather detective work for us out in the field of trying to help determine what that value is in tandem with the appraiser. Does that make sense? I know it's complicated, but that's what's happening today.
Right.
Appraisers are sometimes having a hard time making the value because things are selling overnight.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I have heard that from many professionals in that touch the real estate industry and just the backlog. So that's a great point. We are, again, one of the final points for choosing do's and don'ts of home buying is effective communication. And I think we've covered that quite a bit today. We do just have time for this one last question from our audience member. And our virtual audience member, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. So if someone were targeting some specific cities that they particularly wanted to move to, they're appealing to them, and ideally looking for going from a two-story to a single or a one-level house. Are there particular resources available for someone that's looking for that particular type of living, that style of house? And how can they find that potentially in general in the various cities that they're looking at, other than obviously talking to their realtor?
I would say that the couple things to look for is, depending on what city they're looking at, if you look at Loudoun County as a whole, we're not building a lot of one-level homes. There's not a lot here, which is a bit of a challenge.
Right.
Some areas of the country are just well known for their one-level living. So if you're choosing an area, you may want to choose an area that traditionally builds like that, or look for builders. Specifically, maybe you have a home, semi-custom or custom built in an area that fits your lifestyle. But really, I think the only way to search that is a tool that a realtor would have for them. We can search type of homes to very specific details in terms of a rambler or how many levels, or is there a master bedroom on the first floor? Those are search criteria that are not easy to find on websites like Zillow or Realtor.com. So really talking to a local realtor, they'll help you dig into that a little bit better.
Excellent. And again, that last do is use that effective communication. So specifically in this case, and as we talked about before, is highlighting those needs and needs versus wants. And is that the priority as you're searching for that one level? So again, when you decide it's time to buy a home, review and prepare your finances, develop your expectations, so, reality versus the dream. Don't get in love with the one house, have some options. Find one of these fine realtors here that you can trust, and over communicate. Prepare, over communicate. These are just good life lessons, right? So carry that into your home buying experience. Again, I want to thank Barry, Dave, and Allison for joining us today. This is a great discussion. I love the questions that came in. We appreciate your time in this very, very busy season of yours. Thank you for all you do to build our community up. And on behalf of the Tools for Life workshop series for Loudoun Habitat for Humanity, we thank you guys for tuning in and being with us. just visit loudonhabitat.org to register for any of the upcoming workshops. And the next workshop, actually related to our discussion today, will be on October 1st, where we'll discuss your first home and preparing financially for home ownership, back to Barry's first point. So again, thank you very much, everyone, for being here today, and we hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Carrie.
Carrie.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.